So probably today we'll take a quick look at some of the user stories that you have created, and for rest of them maybe I'll provide feedback separately, but maybe we'll look at a couple of them so that you know what are the common mistakes or what is the ideal way to create user stories. Okay, so I'm I'm just opening it on first come first basis. So Pooja was the first one to send. So I've just opened her. And quickly go here to just give me a second. Okay. So the scenario that we had yesterday was a transfer payment, right, to my friend. Okay, so that was the scenario. So the title is, as a end user or customer, I should be able to transfer funds to listed or added beneficiaries through my net banking account so that I can send money to them. Okay, so the three key things. So we have the user listed here, which is good. And then we are also followed by the user's intent, what the user wants to do, and then what is the expected result. Okay, so this is a good title of a user story, so no issues with this. And so description, you don't have any specific format or criteria. So here you've given, okay, so we need to listed or added beneficiaries can be viewed on beneficiary list. Available balance can be viewed in account summary. Accounts permitted for fund transfer can be viewed under transaction limit. Transaction passwords will need to be correct. All of these. Okay, so this is like good to have information. Then the most important thing is the acceptance criteria. So we first look at the syntax. So we have given, we have when, and then we have then. Okay, and so the example syntax is incorrect. So example should have a colon after examples, otherwise it won't create. Okay, so now we look at the actual story. So we given user has logged into HDFC Bank net banking and open the HDFC net banking, manage my funds, transfer funds. When the user clicks on listed beneficiaries list to see if the required beneficiaries are there, and fund transfer limit should prompt against the selected beneficiary, and the available balance in the account for fund transfer should be prompted, and user clicks, adds the transaction password, user clicks on instant or scheduled transaction, and user clicks on submit button, then the then the system to transfer funds is added, and check if there's available balance and verify the listed beneficiary and transaction limit. Okay. Okay, so this is a good first attempt. So it looks decent. So we have followed, the title looks fine, the description looks fine. We have followed the syntax as expected. So the background also looks almost fine. But so here in reality, what happens is we'll have multiple scenarios, right? So we'll have multiple user stories when we are delivering a feature. Okay. And we need to be so if we try to club all the requirements into one story, right, it will complicate the user story and a developer may not be able to understand clearly. So that's the first thing. Second thing is, if we if we have a large user story, right, we'll not be able to move it to done on a daily basis. Okay, so it will, there'll be a lot of uncertainty. So which is why it's good to slice the user story into smaller requirements. Okay, so in this case, for example, the user wants to transfer money to his friend, correct? So what I would do is I would go and add. So for example, you've thought of like good conditions that the account balance should be there, transaction password should be entered, user clicks on submit button, right? So maybe I will go, and so the scenario that we are referring here is user should transfer funds to his beneficiary, right, or friend. So here in the given, under given, so maybe I will go and add few more conditions here. Given user has logged into HDFC net banking and the user has enough, it has available funds as balance. Okay, and
Hey, hi Ravi.
yeah, beneficiary
Your voice is
list.
breaking. Might be it's a net problem in my side, or it's
How
everyone
about others? Are
experience.
you able to hear?
Yes, Ravi, I'm able to hear you.
Yes, Ravi.
Yes.
Maybe on your side, Vijay, do you want to
Okay.
log in again?
Yeah, yeah. I can just.
Okay. And beneficiary listed and active. Okay, and so maybe I'll move this. This is the key action that the user will be expected to do, right? So when the user opens HDFC net banking and clicks on instant or scheduled transaction and clicks on submit button, then the funds are transferred as added. Okay, so something like that. But if, and so all of these, right? So this is again, so you can still add it after that to indicate that, okay, this is something that we are checking after the submit button. So this is good to have, but we have already mentioned it here, and a developer should be able to understand. The other correction here is, so you put transfer funds, right? Then the system to transfer funds is added. So transfer funds is more like a parameter, okay? So whereas here it says account summary, beneficiary list, transaction limit. So instead of transfer funds, I would put something like, then the system to maybe transfer funds based on payment mode selected. Then I'll put payment mode in as a parameter. Then I'll go and give payment mode parameter here as an example. And then I will list all the payment modes here. So these are, so these should be examples of whatever values you list below, right? These should be examples of the parameter that you're creating in the acceptance criteria. So NEFT, or maybe what else is there? Maybe something like
IMPS.
IMPS, yeah. Okay, so three scenarios, and then we are good with it. Okay, so the learning here is that try to give as many as conditions under given, because this is the background, right? And the scenario starts with user transferring funds. Okay, so basically, so your when should start from when the user transfers funds, and everything else should be given. So the reason why I'm saying that everything else should be in given is because, so what happens is when you put many things in the given, right? A developer, it's very easy for a developer to automate whatever you are putting in given when he's trying to automate the testing. Okay, so he will create a automation code which does everything under given by default. Okay, so that's the advantage. Any
Okay. Ravi, I had just one question about this then criteria. So the payment mode is put in. So obviously, so the fund would be transferred using either of the modes. So the system has to understand the payment mode, and not transfer fund is just the GUI, like it's on the screen for the user, right?
Yeah, correct.
Okay. So that's where I just got confused.
Yeah, so
Okay.
whatever is the parameter, right? You should list examples
Hmm.
for that parameter in the example.
Correct.
Yeah,
Now I got it.
yeah. Okay, so let's look at another example.
So, Ravi, I have a query here.
Yeah, yeah.
So, as you told in the beginning, we can differentiate into two user stories, like one is login and another is transfer. That will be better, or
Yeah, yeah,
one
correct.
user
So,
story?
so the scenario that we gave, right, the transfer funds. So login, I'm assuming that login is already developed. Okay, so we have a separate user story for login, and that's already developed. And in this sprint, we are developing transfer
Okay.
funds.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then it's okay. Fine. Got it.
Okay, so we'll look at, so who was the second? So Pooja, you've written a technical user story also, right?
Yes, I have written, but I'm not pretty sure because I just wrote it. I still
Okay,
had
got
many
it.
doubts understanding.
Okay.
Yeah.
So actually, so even if you're having trouble writing technical user stories, right, it's absolutely fine, because 99% of the times we write functional user stories and very rarely we write technical user stories. So that's still fine. And to write technical user stories, right, you should have a bit of understanding of technology. Otherwise, it will be a little difficult. So in this example, for example, so we say validate the data of the new user tables, right? So this is the scenario that we thought. So given table, given that table has been created, okay. So we'll normally try to use like simple tense. So something like it will be given that table is created. Given that table. So we should say table and the parameter, because what happens is this parameter will be replaced as it is. Okay, so that's why we should say table and table underscore name is parameter. When the user logs into database and views the table, then select rows and columns of table and data type are displayed as documented. Okay, so this is, I think you've done it well, Pooja. So just that you
Okay.
have to write this code.
Yes.
So I think, yeah,
Okay.
this is good. So this is a simple technical user story.
Right.
I think you have done a good job.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. And so we'll look at maybe a couple of more. Who was the second person? I think second person to send was Anshuman, I think. Okay, let's look at Anshuman's stories. Anshuman, what was your document's name? Was it like just user story, right?
This user story.
Is this the one? Is this yours?
No.
What you see on the screen, no?
This is recent.
This is yours, Vijay. So we'll look at yours next. Is this yours? I
It's
think
mine.
others. Okay. Okay. Is this yours?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So what I'll do, I'll just do it in. So I'll do change. I'll review everyone else's. So I'll also send it as a reply to you. But we'll just review few of them on the call so you get an understanding. Okay, so here as a net banking customer, I want to log in, add beneficiary, and then transfer amount to a person. Anshuman, so there is something missing here. Do you recognize now based on what we discussed, what is missing? There's something, one part missing here in the title.
So it's like the format actually.
Yeah, so can anyone else highlight what is missing in this title?
The show that part is missing. As a net banking customer, I want to log in, add beneficiary so that I can transfer amount to the person.
To a person, so that my friend receives money, for example, something like that. Okay, or maybe so that my friend buys me a book, for example, something like that. So it's very important to understand what is the end user's motivation. Okay, that will come after so that, and this will help the developer to develop a more robust solution, because sometimes if you don't understand what the end user wants, right, we'll not develop the right solution. So which is why it makes sense to always think. So the user story, good user story has three things: the user, what he wants, and why he wants to do something. Okay. Then the description looks fine. He should be able to add, and so acceptance criteria. Given user has a username and password to log into internet banking. Given user has a valid username and password to log into internet banking. So keywords like these, right? Valid username is important because this will help your developer to understand, okay, so there can be a non-valid user as well. Okay, so it will help your developer to come up with multiple scenarios when developing. Okay, and open the internet banking homepage. When user clicks on add beneficiary option to add a new beneficiary, and okay, so I'm assuming that, okay, maybe like beneficiary is not added. Okay, and click on transfer option to transfer money to added beneficiary. Then the system should show two options to add beneficiary to same bank and to others bank. And the system shows two options to transfer to a beneficiary to same bank. Okay. Okay, so I think this is where you can use like examples, Anshuman. So instead of, so what happens is when you write this acceptance criteria, right, it will generate like one test case. And so what happens is when you are testing this, right, you have to test IMPS, RTGS, NEFT in the same test case. Okay, what if IMPS is working and RTGS and NEFT is not working? Okay, so your whole story will be pending to be done, right? So whereas if you add something like this, payment options, okay, and then you come here and then you put examples. Then you add something like IMPS, etc.
So these are kind of keywords that should be used.
Which one?
this payment option, because I have mentioned that it shows options for only, so it's like payment.
No, you can use anything. So there is no restriction. You can use options also. That's absolutely fine. The only keywords are given when, then, and examples. Those are the keywords that you should use mandatorily. But others you can. So what I'm saying is, if you parameterize here, right, it will go and create two test cases, one for IMPS, other for RTGS. And when the tester is testing, right, he will have two test cases. And so he will test IMPS and he will say pass. And then he will test RTGS. And if RTGS fails, right, he can at least pass like one test case and the other one will be pending. So we know what is the issue and we'll focus only on that.
Okay, so examples, when we put it, it is kind of repeating the same for the process.
When you have like, yeah, it's repeating the same action for different options. See, similarly, you can also parameterize, okay, then the system shows two options to add beneficiary to same bank and other banks, transfer money to a beneficiary to same bank and to other banks, right? So you can also, what if the same bank is working and other banks is not working? Okay, so maybe you can say, maybe you can say something like this, bank options, and then you go and write here, bank underscore options. Okay, and then you say same bank, and then you say other bank. Okay, so then it creates like different test cases for you, and you can repeat this IMPS same bank, and then you can copy one more line here and say IMPS other bank. Okay, and then you can say RTGS. You've said RTGS other bank, so you can say same bank. Okay, so now it's going and creating 4 test cases. So IMPS same bank, IMPS other bank, RTGS same bank, and RTGS other bank will be replaced in your test case.
Okay, so if whatever condition we have to mention, we have to state it explicitly.
Yeah, correct. So you have to parameterize here and then give the list here in under examples.
So all the condition we have to think about it and
yeah, correct. Yeah.
Then the code will work. Otherwise, it will not generate.
So this is, so your developer, when he is developing, right, he will go and look at the title. Okay. Achha, okay, so the user wants to do this and this is the purpose. Okay, and then he understands the end user's purpose, right? But whereas in traditional documentation, like when we use BRD and FSD, a developer will get FSD, okay, and he won't understand what is the actual goal of the user. Okay, whereas in when you write a user story, it's very easy for him to understand. So he will ask like good questions and deliver the right solution. Similarly, he will look at your acceptance criteria, and when he develops, right, he will automate your acceptance criteria to as a unit, as part of unit testing, and he will test this and give you the test results, saying that, okay, he will only say that his development is done when he passes your acceptance criteria. This will be
So,
your
okay. So when we are writing acceptance criteria, so we have to cover all the different combination, right?
Yeah, different combinations, but at the same time, if you try to put everything into one acceptance criteria, right, and one story, the developer will be confused. So you need to logically sequence it. For example, let's say you want to include add beneficiary scenario, right? So you create another scenario. As a net banking customer, I want to add, modify, or delete beneficiaries and put it as additional user story.
So that would be a okay. So that would be a separate user story, right?
Yeah, correct. So you need to slice it into smaller and simpler user stories so that your developer can easily understand and your tester can easily test.
Okay, and that has always, I mean, vertical slicing, right?
Correct. Yeah. Okay, so that's second one. We can take a look at one more. This is yours, right, Vijay?
Yeah, so actually Valinder and me work
Okay.
on the
Sure.
same one.
Okay. So as an existing user, I should be able to within the same bank. Okay. So here also that is missing. Because you worked with the end user, right? You know what the end user is trying to do, but your developer is sitting somewhere in the corner. He will not know if you don't mention it here explicitly.
Got it? Yeah.
Okay, and here in the acceptance criteria, you will say given user has logged into net banking and open transfer funds, all pay, select pay and transfer type. Okay, when the user, okay, and verify the status. Okay, I think this, everything else looks fine. Just under given, maybe you can add like more conditions, like you can say maybe like given valid user and as active beneficiaries, something like this.
Okay.
I think this looks fine. Vijay, I think it's good.
And we have only mentioned one test case, and we can just replicate for other two options.
Yeah, correct. So it will just replicate for RTJS, NEFT, and IMPS. Yeah, correct.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So for others, I'll just make some changes if and then just respond to your mail.
Aviv, I was just trying with a free account in JIRA, but I could not. Means I could able to write the user story, but not the acceptance criteria.
Yeah, because maybe it's not available in the free version of Jira. But
No, I
it's a separate section where in the when you're writing the user story, right? You can write a user story. Maybe I'll show you guys mock-up on how it actually looks on the screen. But what is more important is you should be able to write user stories on your own, and people will ask you to write user stories in interviews. Okay, so this looks good. So today we'll move on to the next concepts. Okay, we'll look at the BA artifacts. Okay, so so there are multiple artifacts that we as business analysts will be preparing. Some of them, right? So for example, the user acceptance test plan, user acceptance testing status report, all of these are prepared by testers and test managers. But nevertheless, I'll just give you like sample formats for you to refer, so that you have a basic understanding of how it looks like. Okay, but as a user, right? Sorry, as a business analyst, what we majorly prepare is a user story in agile projects. And let's say, for example, if you're working on a fixed term project or maybe like a waterfall project, there are two things that we need to prepare. Okay, so one is business requirement document, and then convert this business requirement document into a functional specification document. Okay, so we'll look at these two a bit more in detail, and then so I'll give you guys a scenario, and if you can create a BRD and then FSD over the weekend and send it to me, right? We can review it on Monday. Okay, and for all others, I'll take you through the structure of it, and then so that you know what are these artifacts and what is in it there. Okay. So first we'll start with BRD. Has anyone on the call prepared a BRD anytime?
Not BRD. Basically, I prepare functional spec.
Functional specification. Okay. Okay, that's good. The first thing that we need to understand is what is a BRD and how is an FSD different from a BRD. Okay, so BRD is nothing but business requirements document. These are the requirements. Okay, so you can consider it as a list of problems, opportunities, or wish list or needs the user has. You document all the requirements the user has in the business requirements document. Okay, so a business requirement document, when you think of a business requirements document, right, think of what? Okay, what the user wants, right? But whereas if you think of a functional specification document, think of how. Okay, how will you deliver what the user wants? Okay, so you will document what in the BRD and you will document how in the functional specification document. Okay. Any questions? Is it clear on the difference between BRD and FSD? Okay. The other important thing to remember is um, so these documents, right, can be called in different conventions, okay, in the real world, but the ideal names are BRD and functional specification document. People will call these in different names, so don't get confused. If somebody comes and says, okay, can you create a software specification document? Okay, don't get confused. Oh, I heard of BRD and FSD, but what is this software specification document? So a software specification, an FSD can also be called as a software specification document. Okay, some people, what if someone comes and says, can you create an SRD? Okay, stakeholder requirement document. A stakeholder requirement document is nothing but a business requirements document. So people, in every organization can have a unique way of calling these documents. So don't get confused. There are only two documents. One is BRD and the other is FSD that a business analyst has to prepare. Okay, so there is another document called technical specification document that is prepared by a developer in the traditional waterfall. So for a BA, always think there is one document where you gather what the user wants, and there is another document where you document how it needs to be delivered. Okay. Who has joined? Okay, so has someone dropped off? No. Okay, so we'll go through the structure of the document, and then so it'll be good if each of you can prepare a BRD and then send it to me. Okay, so the BRD that we are going to prepare here is for project. I'm taking a simple example of a project. So we are working for HDFC Bank, and then so our net banking application is not robust. Okay, so a lot of customers are complaining, and then it's not efficient. It's frequently going down, and then it's not very user friendly. So we are developing a new net banking application. Okay, and so within the net banking application, so we are going to add a new. So we have set up the net banking application, and then we are going to add a new feature where, let's say, if a customer is transferring like multiple payments to one beneficiary, right? So he wants to consolidate net all those payments and transfer as one payment. Okay, so that is the enhancement that we are developing on the net banking application.
Ravi, can you please state requirement once again?
Yeah, so okay, so we can do it in both ways. So one is so if you're looking at like writing a BRD, which is a bit more elaborative, right? So we can take a project like this. Okay, so we have a net banking application, and we are working for, let's say, a bank called HDFC. We have a net banking application which is not working as expected. Okay, so it has issues, customer complaints, it's frequently going down. Okay, now we have to develop a new net banking application. Uh, and in that net banking application, we should also have a functionality where, let's say, if I am transferring to you like 10 payments in a day, okay, maybe one payment is 1,000 rupees, another payment is 2,000, other is 3,000. So instead of transferring them individually, I want you to hold all these payments and give me an option to net all these payments into one payment and send it as one payment to the beneficiary.
Okay.
Okay, so for example, if I make a transfer of 1,000 at 2 and then another 2,000 at 3, so I want you to hold both these payments and then transfer like 4,000 end of the day.
Okay.
Okay, and this is an
So
option
if
that you are this is not, you're not making it as a default. Your customers can select this option for each of the beneficiaries, for any of the beneficiaries they want. Okay, so this is how a typical BRD will look like. So you will see date issued, the version keeps incrementing as and when we do more revisions. Then what is the status? Status could be like draft or approved or signed requirement. Okay, and you can put the location, so document locations where the document is placed. Okay, and who has prepared the document. And then you have like different, so you maintain the change control, you maintain the revision. So for example, you are the author and then you make some changes. Okay, so you get it reviewed with different stakeholders, or you get it reviewed with the developer or your peers, other business analysts, right? So each of them, so you keep adding and then you maintain a version control. Okay, and so distribution list, who will you send this document to? Okay, and what is their responsibility? Is their responsibility only for information, or are they like approver, or they could be like reviewer? So you list all of them. So you're, maybe for now just put my name as reviewer and then put like some end user's name, just put end user as approver. Okay, and so you, after you get the requirement signed off, right, the final approved version will have the name and then the signed version, latest version, so that is signed off, the sign off date, and you will attach the email sign off here into the document. Okay, so this for your practice, right, you don't need to do this, it's just for your information that this is how it works. And so you list what is the purpose of the document. So in the purpose, you will call out, okay, so traditionally users have complained about issues with the net banking application stability and they were not happy with it. So we are working on a digital transformation initiative to upgrade net banking to make it more robust and also include a functionality where payments can be netted, okay, based on beneficiaries configuration. Yeah. So you will list what are the items in scope. Okay. So for example, this is just the first phase where your goal is to only enable like transfer. Okay, so you don't want to include any of the other features like apply for loan or apply for IPO and all of them. So you can put them in out of scope. Okay, and you can put whatever requirements that you plan to deliver in this phase in scope. Okay, and when you put something out of scope, you also indicate what is the reason for exclusion. So just give some dummy reason for now. Okay, and so we start documenting the requirements, and then we give priority, and then we we indicate dependency. For example, the first requirement could be BR_01. So we say all active banking users should be able to log in with their user ID and password. Priority high. Okay, then we say BR_2. Once the user has successfully logged in, or you can simply say user should be able to transfer funds via IMPS or TGS in EFT. Okay, so high. Okay, but this has a dependency, right? So without login, you can't do it, right? So we put a dependency on BR1. Okay, so think of requirements like this and then document. So you don't need to document like too many. So maybe like 3 or 4 should be fine for practice. Okay, so you can document like any of the out of scope business requirements also here, and say what is the reason for excluding, and then any assumptions that you're making here. So you have to list all the assumptions here. So again, you can maybe write like 2 assumptions. So an assumption could be that for example, let's say when we are the assumption would be that we don't want any other value add functionalities, right? So for example, like apply for loan or anything else. Okay, or let's say if you are including a functionality like download statements, so you are making an assumption that all customers would need statements in PDF format. Okay, for example, this could be an assumption. Okay, and dependencies is, so you can write something like availability funding, probably like, or budget. Okay, for example, or anything. So you can think of any dependencies that your requirement could have. Okay, and then you document the non-functional requirements. Non-functional requirements are not directly related to the functionality, but they are more on how your system is expected to operate. Okay, so what is the availability? So and what should the performance be? Okay, for example, my net banking application should be available 24/7. Okay, so this is a non-functional requirement. And performance. Okay, so for example, when a user should be able to transfer funds in less than 30 seconds. Okay, so this is a performance thing, right? So hours of operation, so you can put this 24/7 here. any data validation related non-functional requirements you can add here. So maybe like one or two. For example, a data validation non-functional requirement could be customer user login ID should only be numeric. Okay. Or something like user password should contain at least one special character. Okay, so this could be a data validation. Okay, then you write the performance. Then how do you maintain any failure, because the customers already complain that okay, so they the net application is not available during some peak hours, and then it's not able to tolerate the load. So how will you manage failure? So maybe you can write something like adequate logs should be available when there is a failure for further investigation. Okay. And so you can link this to any of the BRD. So if this is linked to one of the business requirements that you detailed above, right? If this NFR is related to that, so you can link that here. So it's linked to BR_1, something like that. Okay. So this is the typical structure. So where we write, where we fill in all these details, and then we send it to the user and get it signed off. Any questions on this? Yes, no.
This is a BRD or else it's a FSD?
This is a BRD. I'll show you FSD next.
But in this case, if it is in BRD, we don't want to be present these many columns. Like right, it's like is there any non-functional requirements?
So non-functional requirements, so we are not exactly giving more like a specification. So non-functional requirements is, for example, the application should be available 24/7, right? So this is a.
I will, okay, please correct me if I'm wrong. Okay, so generally in the BRD level, will you, it will tell that means what is required for me and what we have the current functionality we are using. On top of that one, what feature it is required and why it is required.
No, what and why is it required? Right, yeah.
That's all right. Okay,
yeah,
so
correct.
And beyond that one, it's is there any impact on the functional requirement? That one is then FSD has to tell us, because why business people will tell on that one what is the impact on that on my technical level, other way, correct?
So because okay, so that's a good question. For example, let's say your business people will say, I want this system to be available 24/5. Okay, I don't want it to be available on Saturday and Sunday. So who can tell? Should the developer say or the business guys say?
Okay, for example, okay, my business requirement is, okay, my system needs to be available on 24/7.
Yeah.
Okay, so in that case, that is the requirement.
Yeah, correct.
Okay. Okay, so then they will tell what is my current behavior. Okay, the business requirement will tell what is my current behavior, what is I require. Okay, so and what is the benefit of the bank.
Yeah, that's what we are writing it here, right? So we are writing, so what is my expected behavior that we have. So I want it to be available 24/7. So I'm not saying, so the difference between a BRD and FSD is, so you will document whatever the user is telling, so all the wish list the user has, including non-functional requirements. Okay, so that's why they're called requirements, right? They're not called non-functional specifications. So you take all the non-functional requirements as well from the user, and then you create the functional specification document where you describe how you want to achieve this.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, so this is how a typical BRD looks like. And so sometimes what happens is if you have to, when you're documenting the requirements, right, you may need to prepare some use case diagrams and UML diagrams as well, or process flow diagrams, and then reference here into the requirements. Okay, so if the requirement is like complex, so you can also include those diagrams and other artifacts and external documents as well. Okay, and normally when you start working as a BA in any organization, right, every organization will have like its own standard templates. Okay, so always ask if your team has any standard templates that they follow. Okay, and it's good to stick to that format, but a typical BRD will include all these sections that we have gone through now. Any questions on BRD?
Ravi, I'm not sure whether this question makes silly, but in any instance, if with the limited information, documenting the BRD, so what should we do if you're not known of the information, like scope or out of scope?
That's a good question. So so which is why that kind of problem is solved in Scrum, right? So such projects where you have a lot of unknowns, you should propose your organization to use Scrum. So for example, if your organization is rigid and they're not able to do it right, so what you can always do is, so you have a requirement which is sent out, and then you can always go and add any new requirements here. Okay, and then update this with changes.
Okay.
Or you can create another change request, a simple document with other enhancements. Okay, so if you think some of the requirements are not clarified, right, you get it signed off, and then you create another change request, a mini BRD, and then get those additional requirements signed off.
Okay. And one more doubt. So when we are writing user stories with requirements, so why do we require a business BRD again to be
Oh,
written?
I'm not saying that you should write both the user story and BRD. So nobody is writing BRD these days. Okay, so the last I wrote a BRD was maybe like 3 years back. Okay, but the reason I'm showing you a BRD is there are still few projects where you have to write BRD. Okay, so everyone has to write user stories, because a user story is more written more from a user's perspective, and it's more flexible than a BRD. Okay, but there are still some projects where they follow this traditional waterfall, so you should also know how to write a BRD.
Okay, okay. So in traditional waterfall, if the team is following up, then we have to prepare BRD. If it is
Yeah, correct.
Scrum or Agile, then it is more or
For
less.
example, you have interview with SocGen, right? So in SocGen, so I worked with SocGen like 3 years back. In SocGen, nobody writes a BRD. So everyone writes only user stories, and they have been writing user stories only since like last 7 years. They have been writing since they implemented Scrum. They write only user stories. So in your interview, nobody will ask you about BRD. And if you say that you're writing BRD, maybe they may think that, okay, you didn't work in Agile. Okay, so it's all user stories. User stories and writing acceptance criteria in Gherkin format, writing acceptance criteria in BDDs. So Gherkin format is nothing but BDD, behavior-driven development.
Okay, okay. So most of the organization follow the user story format.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so this is on the BRD. Then we look at FSD. Okay, so an FSD is, so you write the same way again. So you write the status, version, author, and version published. So I've used a slightly different format here, just to tell you, give you a feel that there is no standard format for any of these, right? BRD and FSD. So you need to follow whatever your organization template is saying. Okay. So that's why I changed the format slightly for an FSD. So an FSD, so maybe you can indicate like some organizations can have, okay, indicate who is your project manager, program name, etc. And then you write your change history and the details of approvals and sign off and any reference documents. Okay, and then you have the table of contents, and then you give introduction. So you describe the purpose of the document, and then you describe what are the inputs and outputs and usage of the document, etc. And then you list all the stakeholders, their responsibilities, so and their role or interest. Okay, are they like approvers or reviewers, etc. And then you list the roles of all the approvers. Okay, and then you attach their signature, which is nothing but an export of the email approval. Okay, and then you write like an executive summary on, so what is this change, and then what are you exactly trying to achieve, more on a high level. Okay, and then any of the glossaries or any of the terminologies that you are including in your BRD, right? This will help your developer to understand them. Okay, so you write all of them, and then you detail any of the risks and assumptions as well. So sometimes some organizations can have this risk and assumption section in the BRD as well. So don't be surprised if you come across that. And then you create a traceability between BRD and FSD. Okay, so this is the BRD requirement ID, and then you have a corresponding FSD requirement ID. Okay, so this traceability will ensure that you have not missed out any of the requirements when you're creating the functional specification. Okay, so it will be something like, let's say, you don't need to create like too many functional specifications. For example, let's say if you want to create like just one for practice, so you can say BR_01 is the requirement, and for that requirement I have a functional specification FR01. Okay, so this is a traceability to make sure that you're not missing out on any of the requirements. Okay, and then you also define the priority.
So Ravi,
yeah,
this is the mapping of BRD with FSD, right?
Correct, yeah. So FSD will, so with this FR and all I'll show you it will come a little later. So it's actually at the bottom, the actual requirement. And so this is just to ensure completeness and we're not missing out on any of the requirements. And priority key again, so you have high, medium, and low. And some organizations, so you may also have priority key within the BRD as well. Okay, so organization may say, okay, what is the priority of each of the requirements? Include them in the BRD. Okay, so that's also possible, right? And so you include the status of the FSD, and you say draft or review or final or signed off. Okay, so you see status at the top, right? So that's something you can include as well. And this is the key. So where you include what is the function that you're trying to achieve, then this is the functional specification ID. And then you explain what is the current state, how is it looking from a system perspective, and what is the business reason for change, and then you explain what is the target state. Okay, so for example, let's say let's look at a simple functionality like a user should be able to log in, okay, with user ID and password. Okay, I'll say customer login. Okay, and then I will say it is coming from BR_01. Okay, and priority is high. So current state in our net banking application, a user can log in with a numeric user ID with length of 8 numbers and the password can be of length 8 characters, and there is no enforcement to include special characters. Okay, so let's assume that this is the current state of the login screen. Okay, business reason for change is to have additional security and avoid any hackers obtaining customer sensitive information. Okay, so target state are change. So we'll say something like this. Okay, we'll say, okay, our user ID should be of 8.
Ravi, I'm getting some disturbance. Is that thing?
Can people go on mute? I think let me mute. Okay, I'm just muting all. Still, it's coming. Okay, I think it has gone now. Okay, so we are saying a user ID should be of 8 characters in length. Okay, for example, something like this. And so now in the target state, a password should contain at least one special character. Maybe you can say except.
So Ravi, this can be predicted as a kind of a user story only, right? FSD.
So basically in a user story, right, you're combining both BRD and FSD into one. Okay. The good thing about user story is you don't need to stick to all these rules. Okay, that okay, so you need to write it in this format. You need to follow this this particular style of writing. Okay, and you need to update, like you see, right, a lot of unwanted sections and all of this. So whereas in a user story, all you need is, okay, express in user terms in pure user's language, just write acceptance criteria. It's much more easier and standardized, right? And whereas if you look at a BRD and FSD, every organization will have a different perspective and a different template. And a lot of times you end up drafting like too much of information, which may not be understandable for your developer. Okay, so something like this, and then you can also include some mock-up screens as well. Okay, so maybe you can create like mock-up screens in Excel or include it, or maybe just take a screenshot of HDFC Net Banking and put it here. So you can create mock-up screens using Visio, or you can have mock-up screens using your Confluence, or you can create some mock-up screens using simple MS Paint, etc. And then you include all the non-functional requirements specifications here. Okay, so for example, you can describe what is the availability of and what kind of data volumes are you looking at. For example, the net banking application should be able to process at least 10 lakh transactions in a day. Okay, or it could be something like this. Okay, the net banking database should be able to store 1 billion records per year, for example. Okay, so you're defining your data volumes so that your developer will know what kind of performance or what kind of tech stack he needs to procure when he's setting up the environment. Okay, similarly availability, performance also, so he can determine what is the performance. So for example, so it could be like, you can say the transfer should not take more than like 30 seconds or 2 minutes or whatever you think the performance should be. Events and monitoring, so you can say something like create a log file with name user underscore logs whenever when a user enters incorrect user ID or password. Okay, and then you can also go ahead and add more specifications like, okay, so in this you can say 1.1, and then you can say when the user enters incorrect user ID, log a message saying user did not enter numeric.
Ravi, I have a question over here.
Yeah.
Thing is like there are so many requirements now. BRD, normally when we write, we hear it from the user, and as per their requirement, we write the BRD. That's just a kind of formulation of what the user says, right? What the user requirement is.
Correct.
As per their wordings, right?
Yeah.
And then from BRD, we formulate this FSD.
Correct. So how we will solve the user's requirements or problems is what we define here. So it's more system oriented, whereas BRD is more like more of listing down users' requirements, needs, problems, opportunities.
Yeah. So because when we have user stories, when you have Scrum, then it's like both BRD and FSD are put into the user story at one go.
Correct.
But
yeah.
if we don't have that, we have Waterfall, then we have BRD and FSD and no user stories.
Yeah, correct. So what happens in this, right? So traditionally what we have been doing is, so we give the developer FSD. Okay, so if we give the developer an FSD, he will not understand from a user's perspective. Okay, and a lot of times what happens is these BRDs can go up to, like, I have created BRDs like 100 pages for like large programs, and then converted them into FSDs for like 250 pages, including all screenshots, mock screens, etc. And what happens is, so you're setting up yourself a failure, right? And the project will go on for 1 year. And so after 1 year, the user will say, I don't need this. Okay, so my customers have already left the bank, because so do you think your customers will stick to you if your net banking is not stable for 1 year, right? By the time you follow Waterfall and you deliver all these functionalities, your customer already left and your bank is already shut down. So a lot of times what happens to Waterfall projects is you will invest a lot of money and effort, and finally you won't go live.
Okay.
So I've seen cases like that.
And 100 pages, how many days it takes for a BA to put it?
So generally, right, you will not have like one BA documenting. So you will divide it into like multiple segments. Multiple BAs will be working on with different users. So one user will be working with the security team. One BA will be working with the customers. One BA would be working with the product team. So one BA will be working on branding. Okay, so the look and feel of the application. Okay, one BA would be working on single sign-on and all of that. So different things.
So they will be putting across their sections into the BRD.
Correct. Yeah. Okay, but it goes on. So so when I started off like maybe 14 years back, right? I conducted requirement gathering sessions in Mumbai BKC office for 6 months. Only requirement gathering for 6 months. So you can
6
imagine.
months for requirement gathering.
Yeah. So every day morning going to meeting room. So I was working with ING Vaishya. So their office was in BKC. So go get into the meeting room, gather requirements, document the BRD. Okay, every day, and we did that for 6 months.
Ravi, when user gets frustrated, what you do?
That's a very generic question, right? What when a user gets frustrated, he could get frustrated for different reasons, right?
Yeah. So did you have any kind of such situations and phase that user is unwilling to lend his time?
Yeah, so many situations like that. We'll cover them in the situational interview questions. So when you face such situations, how to handle.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Ravi, this is today's session that I can relate is like more of waterfall based, but it may come to you. You never know, but it's more of a waterfall based.
Yeah, correct. So waterfall based, and so the advantage of going through with this waterfall approach, right? For example, let's say if you have a regulatory commitment, okay, you have to deliver something for the regulator, and if you follow Scrum or something like that, where what if something goes wrong, then there will be a blame game, right? But here you identify who are the users, you document requirements, and then you get a clear sign off. So you follow this waterfall in like real sensitive projects. For example, if you are documenting requirements to develop an aeroplane, okay, so can you make any mistakes? Can you follow Agile or Scrum? No, right? So you should follow like Six Sigma, right? Everything should be documented to the minimum possible extent, to the maximum possible extent, and then you should be like 100% accuracy. There is no scope of error, right, in such sensitive projects. Okay, so that's when you need to follow waterfall, stick to documentation, document thoroughly, get it reviewed like 100 times, get it signed off.
Okay.
Okay, so these are the two key documents. Obviously, focus is more on user stories. And so if you can, I'll send you these templates to you for the BRD and FSD. If you can come up with just one or two requirements, convert them into FSDs and send it to me over weekend for review. We can have a quick catch up again on Monday to go through before we move to the other topics. So all the other artifacts, right, they are pretty straightforward. So I'll walk you through like different sections there and share the templates with you.
So Ravi, what is the difference exactly between a user story and a user case? Is it the acceptance criteria is a user case?
No, so use case, it's use case and user story. So user story, so generally what a use case is more like a very high level explaining the system functionality, where how a user is interacting with the system, and it is used as a reference even after the project is done. Okay, but whereas a user story is just a simple user's expression of user's language, and it's mostly redundant once you complete the development. It's not reused. Whereas the use case is reusable, where if you want to explain the system functionality or user interface, right, you can refer to the use case even after the project is done.
Okay. Yeah. So this, what is that called? JIRA, you will be putting a mock someday?
Yeah, so I'll show you like the mock of JIRA on how it looks more for your, so that you can have a mental vision of how JIRA looks like. Okay, but that's not like really important at the moment. So what is more important is you should know how to write user stories, create BRDs and FSDs, because this is bread and butter of business analysts.
Okay.
Okay, any questions from anyone on today's session?
Ravi, can you send this template as an example for us to
Yeah,
guide?
I'll send. Yeah, so I'll send the BRD and FSD.
And Ravi, also can you please share the recording of today and the last 2 days?
I already shared, right? Already shared.